Well, since the primary, the counties have been doing a lot of hands-on training with their poll workers, both their existing poll worker workforce, but also their new poll worker workforce. And so they've been working with training, and they'll do training, training, and retraining, and training, training, and retraining to work them through as many cycles. Because a lot of times it's simple things of setting up the equipment, taking it apart, setting it up the equipment, taking it apart. What happens if a voter shows up and they don't have the proper identification? What is the process for that? What happens when a voter shows up and they submitted an absentee ballot, but they're not showing up on the system, and so they want to vote now in person? So things like that. What are those protocols? And then what do you do as a poll worker when all of a sudden the lines get long, and there's the stress that you get when people may be a little antsy, so to speak. And so it's really, the more you use the system, the better you're able to handle situations that could be thrown at you, on election day. Early voting is relatively smooth for the election officials. It's really that 12-hour period on Tuesday, November 3rd, when everyone's flowing through. You can have 2 million voters probably on that one day versus 2 million that show up for that 3 weeks of early voting. We have 20, we're gonna have about 2,800 precincts now, up from 2,600. And the reason we have 200 more precincts is two things. One is because you actually have a paper ballot now, it takes more time. And so knowing what the throughput of that machine is, you can have, if everything runs smooth, you have the voters all show up at the same time, which they don't, over a 12-hour period. One scanner can actually, working perfectly, 1,725 voters could vote in a day. Let's knock that down to say 1,500. Well, if you have a precinct with 4,000 voters, and you think that two scanners are going to work, it won't. You need at least three. And so we've been giving counties that information, and now about 120 plus of those counties have gotten back where they stand, and we're looking at and going back and analyzing the data and saying, well, you still have an issue on this precinct here, you still have an issue there, and then sending that back to them so they can really make sure that they have the right number of pieces of equipment for that precinct, or they got to cut down the number of voters that can come into that precinct. They got to find a new location to get more machines or more scanners, or they have to cut their precincts in half. But we're giving them that feedback so they can really manage the election process. We're still waiting to get that back from about another 40 of the counties so we can analyze where they are, and then we'll get that back to them and analyze everything. I think that's really useful data for them. We have an ongoing investigation with about 1,000 voters that voted twice. They got their absentee, they did their absentee ballot application, they got their absentee ballot, they sent it in, and it was recorded at the county level. Then they showed up at the county level. They shouldn't have gotten through the system, and that's really, it comes back to it, the human element. And that gets back to training. It was about 100 counties, 120 counties, and so we're going to be reaching really out back to all the counties and really going over and letting them know what can happen, how it can happen, and really circle back on the training element of that. And in the meantime, we're also going to be finishing up that investigation, and we'll have a report, and we'll be getting that to the state election board for their action, but also getting that back out to the counties, all 159 counties, even if they didn't have that issue, just so that they're on guard. We want to make sure that we have smooth and orderly elections for all 159 counties.